I had lived in my apartment for nearly 2 years, and in all that time, my neighbor, Mr. Holloway, had never been much of a talker. He was quiet, kept to himself, and barely made a sound through the thin walls that separated our units. In a building full of late-night partiers and screaming couples, he was the ideal neighbor. That is, until the night he started sleepwalking. The first time it happened, I woke up to a soft knocking at my door. It was around 2:30 a.m., and at first I thought I had imagined it. The city never really slept, and random noises weren't unusual. But then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, rhythmic, too deliberate. I groggily pulled myself out of bed, rubbing my eyes as I stumbled to the door. My apartment was small, just a cramped living room, a tiny kitchen, and a single hallway leading to the front entrance. As I got closer, I hesitated. Something about the knocking felt wrong. It wasn't hurried, like someone desperate to get inside. It wasn't soft, like a neighbor needing a favor. It was empty, mechanical, like someone knocking just for the sake of knocking. I peeked through the peephole. It was Mr. Holloway. He was standing completely still, his forehead pressed lightly against the door. His hands hung limply at his sides, fingers twitching slightly. His body was completely relaxed, except for his face. His lips were stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at him through the peephole, my pulse hammering in my ears. His eyes were open, but they weren't looking at anything. They were unfocused, glassy, as if he were staring through the door rather than at it. His smile never wavered. "Mr. Holloway," I whispered, barely loud enough to hear myself. He didn't respond. He just stood there, smiling. I swallowed hard. My gut told me not to open the door, that something was deeply, terribly wrong. But he was my neighbor. Maybe he needed help. I hesitated, then spoke louder. "Hey, are you okay?" The second the words left my mouth, his head twitched. A quick, sudden jerk, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. Then, in a voice that didn't quite sound like his own, he whispered, "Let me in." A wave of pure, ice-cold dread washed over me. I stepped back, my hands shaking. "You're sleepwalking, Mr. Holloway," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Go back to bed." He didn't move. He didn't blink. The smile never left his face. Then, slowly, so horribly slowly, his head tilted to one side. The motion was unnatural, too smooth, as if his neck was too loose. I backed away. Then, without warning, he slammed his forehead against the door. Bang! I jumped, sucking in a sharp breath. Bang! 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 Harder now, louder, his head cracking against the wood over and over, the force shaking the doorframe. I stumbled back toward my bedroom, my hands scrambling for my phone. Call the police, call the landlord, call someone. But before I could dial, the knocking stopped. Silence. I hesitated, my breath ragged. Slowly I crept forward and peeked through the peephole again. He was gone. The next morning I tried to convince myself it was just a weird one-time thing. Maybe he had a sleeping disorder. Maybe he had been drinking. I avoided him all day, not wanting to bring it up. But that night, just as I was about to drift off to sleep, knock, knock, knock. I bolted upright, my body flooding with adrenaline. I crept to the door, every instinct screaming at me not to look, but I had to know. I peered through the peephole. He was back, standing exactly where he had been the night before. Same clothes, same posture, same horrible, empty smile. Only this time, something was different. His eyes were bleeding. Thin trails of red leaked from his tear ducts, running down his cheeks like ink. But his smile never faltered. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, he was gone again. I tried to act normal, but the dread never left me. And then the next night, knock, knock, knock. I sat in my bed, frozen, staring at my bedroom door. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't answer. I didn't need to check. I already knew it was him. The knocking continued for hours, but eventually, I fell asleep. And when I woke up, my front door was unlocked. That was the last straw. I went straight to the landlord, demanded answers. At first, he looked confused. "Mr. Holloway, he moved out weeks ago." My stomach dropped. "No, he's still in 4B. The landlord shook his head. "That apartment's empty. Has been ever since he hesitated. "Since he what?" I demanded. The landlord exhaled, running a hand over his face. "Since he died," he muttered. The world tilted. "No, that wasn't possible." "You're lying," I whispered. "I saw him. He was knocking on my door." "He hanged himself," the landlord interrupted, his voice flat. "In his bedroom. The cleaners found him 2 weeks ago. No family, no next of kin. The unit's been empty ever since." My mind reeled. 2 weeks ago? But I had seen him, spoken to him. I staggered back toward my apartment, my blood running ice cold. And that night, just as I lay down, trying to convince myself it was all in my head, knock, knock, knock. My breath stopped. I turned my head slowly, staring at my bedroom door. The knocking was coming from inside my apartment, from the closet, and then through the thin wood in that same eerie, broken whisper, "Let me in." It started small, little things. At first, I didn't even think much of it. Maybe I was tired, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but then it got worse. And now, I don't know if I'm living with my girlfriend anymore, or if something else has taken her place. We had been together for 2 years. Anna was always the calm, level-headed one, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make it feel warm. She had this laugh, this real, genuine laugh that could pull you out of the darkest mood. We had just moved in together, renting a small apartment in an older building downtown. The place had character. High ceilings, wooden floors, antique fixtures. There was something cozy about it, something lived in. And then we found the mirror. It was in the bedroom closet, shoved behind a pile of old coats left by the previous tenant. A tall, ornate thing, framed in black wood with intricate carvings along the edges. It looked expensive, the kind of thing you'd find in an old Victorian house. Anna loved it instantly. "I think it gives the room personality," she said, smiling as she positioned it against the wall near our bed. I wasn't so sure. Something about it made my skin crawl. The first time she sleepwalked, I thought it was just stress. I woke up to the sound of soft whispers. I turned over, reaching for Anna, but she wasn't in bed. She was standing in front of the mirror. Her reflection was wrong. Not her exactly. Her posture was stiff, unnatural. Her head was tilted slightly, her lips moving in a hushed, urgent whisper. "Anna?" I called softly. She didn't react. I climbed out of bed, cautiously approaching her. She was barefoot, standing completely still, her fingers twitching at her sides. As I got closer, I realized I could hear another voice. It wasn't coming from her. It was coming from the mirror. A faint, whispering reply. I grabbed her arm, gently shaking her. She inhaled sharply like she had been underwater and turned to me, her eyes glassy and unfocused. Then she blinked. "What?" she murmured, confused. "You were sleepwalking," I said, my voice unsteady. She frowned. "No, I wasn't. I was just sleeping." I stared at her. "Anna, you were talking to the mirror." She laughed, but there was unease in it. "That's creepy. Don't mess with me." "I'm not." Her expression faltered. She turned back to the mirror, staring at her reflection. Maybe I was dreaming, but I wasn't convinced. The next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Every time, it was the same. She would get out of bed, stand in front of the mirror, and talk, and every time I could hear the mirror whispering back. I started staying awake to watch her. One night, I recorded her. When I played it back the next morning, her voice was clear, whispering things I couldn't understand. But the second voice was gone, like it had never been there at all. Anna just laughed when I showed her. I must be stressed, but I could see it in her eyes. She was scared. Then one night it changed. I woke up again to find her standing in front of the mirror, but this time she wasn't whispering. She was crying. Her whole body was trembling, her fingers digging into her arms. I rushed to her, placing my hands on her shoulders. "Anna, baby, wake up!" She turned her head slowly, like something was pulling her attention away from the mirror. But her reflection didn't move. I felt the air drain from the room. I looked from Anna to the mirror, and my stomach twisted violently. Her reflection was still facing forward, still staring at me. And then, it smiled. I pulled her away. I dragged her back to bed, my hands shaking. She murmured something under her breath, still half asleep, but I didn't care. I threw the covers over us and held her tight, my body rigid with fear. I didn't sleep that night. And in the morning, she didn't remember any of it. Not the mirror, not the crying, not the thing wearing her face. She just smiled sleepily and kissed my cheek. "You look like you saw a ghost." I nearly laughed. I nearly told her. But what if she didn't believe me? What if she already knew? The next night I made a decision. I waited until she fell asleep. Then, as quietly as I could, I grabbed a blanket, draped it over the mirror, and turned it to face the wall. Then I locked our bedroom door. But at exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the sound of fabric rustling. The blanket had been pulled off, and Anna was standing in front of the mirror again. Only this time, she was looking at me. "Baby, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. But she wasn't awake. Her lips curled into that wrong, too wide smile, her fingers twitching, and then in a voice that wasn't quite her own, she whispered, "You shouldn't have covered it." I bolted out of bed, yanking her away from the mirror. She let out a gasp, her body convulsing. Then she collapsed against me. She was breathing heavily, her skin clammy with sweat. "What happened?" she whimpered. I held her, heart pounding in my chest. But over her shoulder, I saw something. The mirror. It was no longer showing our reflection. It was showing the bedroom, but we weren't in it. That was last night. Anna doesn't remember. She doesn't remember any of it. But I do. And I know, without a doubt, that the thing in the mirror, the thing that was wearing her face, is still in there, watching, waiting. It started with little things. At first I thought I was just tired, maybe forgetting where I put things. I'd wake up and find the TV remote in the fridge, my phone charger unplugged, the living room light on when I was sure I had turned it off. Then one morning, I woke up and found the front door unlocked. That scared me. I lived alone. I was always careful. I told myself I must have forgotten to lock it, but deep down, something felt off. Then 2 nights later, I woke up with mud on my feet. That's when I knew something was wrong. I decided to set up cameras. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, to prove that I was just sleepwalking and nothing more. Maybe I was just getting up in the middle of the night and not remembering it. I bought a cheap set of motion-activated cameras and set them up. One in my bedroom, one in the living room, and another by the front door. If I was really sleepwalking, I wanted to see it for myself. That night, I went to bed feeling a little ridiculous, but relieved. By morning, I wasn't so sure anymore, because when I checked the footage, I saw myself, standing in the dark, smiling. I watched the recording over and over, my stomach twisting. At around 2:47 a.m., my sleeping body sat up perfectly straight, like a puppet being yanked upright by invisible strings. Then, without hesitation, I turned my head toward the camera, and I smiled. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't awake, either. I was just sitting there, staring, smiling directly at the camera, my head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., I got up. But I didn't move like a person. I moved too smoothly, like I was gliding just above the floor. My feet barely lifted, my arms swinging slightly as if something was pulling me forward. I walked straight out of my bedroom into the dark hallway. Then, just as I disappeared out of frame, the camera glitched. The footage skipped forward, and suddenly I was back in bed, as if I had never gotten up at all. I sat there for hours, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Was it a trick of the camera? A glitch? Or was I losing my mind? I checked the other recordings. The front door camera showed me stepping outside, barefoot, dressed in my pajamas, at 3:02 a.m. But I didn't go anywhere. I just stood there, facing the dark street, motionless. The camera audio picked up whispers, but I couldn't tell if it was me talking or something else. Then, at 3:10 a.m., I turned around and walked back inside. The moment I stepped through the door, the footage glitched again. I was gone. Then, the next frame, I was back in bed. That was the first night. The next night, I forced myself to stay awake. I had to see it with my own eyes. I left the cameras rolling, watching the live feed on my laptop as I lay in bed. My body was tense, every muscle coiled with anxiety. Hours passed, nothing happened. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., the screen flickered, and I wasn't in bed anymore. My heart stopped. I hadn't moved. I would have felt it. But the footage showed something else. My body, or something wearing my body, was standing by the bedroom door, staring out into the hallway. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move, my limbs stiff with terror. I turned my head slowly, and my bed was empty. The blankets were folded neatly, the pillow untouched. I was gone, but I was still here. My pulse pounded in my ears. I grabbed my phone, switched to the front door camera, and there I was, standing outside, staring right at the camera. My mouth was moving, but the audio was silent. My hands hung limply at my sides, my head tilted slightly. Then I looked up, right into the camera, and for the first time I saw my own eyes. They were empty, black, and then my mouth stretched open, wider than a human mouth should go, and the camera cut to static. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I was in bed, the covers pulled up neatly, like nothing had happened. But when I checked my phone, the videos were still there. I had proof, and that's when I noticed something new. A new recording, one I didn't remember setting up. 3:12 a.m., a new angle. The camera was in the hallway now, facing my bedroom door. With shaking hands, I clicked play. The video started in silence. Then, a soft creak. The bedroom door opened slowly. I stepped out, only it wasn't me. It looked like me, moved like me, but its mouth was still open, its jaw unhinged, hanging too far down like something else was inside, trying to get out. Then, it turned, and it wasn't looking at the camera anymore. It was looking at me, staring directly at the lens as if it knew. Then, in a whisper so soft I almost didn't hear it, it spoke, and it said, "You don't have to watch anymore, just let me in." The video cut to black, and the moment it did, a soft knock sounded at my bedroom door. Knock, knock, knock. I'm not asleep right now, but I think something else is, and I think when it wakes up, I won't be here anymore.